Hello and welcome to Gabbett Media. I'm Grant Abbott and today we're going to make a ray gun. It's sort of an old school sci-fi look. Now this tutorial isn't for complete beginners. You need a rough idea of the interface and a few of the basic tools. I'll try and make it as simple as possible, but it would help if you've tried out some of my intro tutorials like the low poly scene with the monster and the man, and maybe try out the chess piece exercise as well, because that will be really helpful in this particular exercise. I'll put all the links in the description and also a link to my website and my Discord server, and if you get stuck at all, do look at the comments below or write your own comment and I will get back to you. I do read all the comments. So let's get started. So I'm in the basic startup file, but I probably will have a few items down here which you won't have. Don't worry about those, they're just add-ons that I've got, and I'll talk you through if I use any of those that you need to add. And you can see that my shortcut keys are down the bottom right here, thanks to J&M. So N to clear that, delete for deleting the default cube, which is already selected. And we're going to add a cylinder. Now I prefer the shortcuts. You can go up to the add menu here, and then mesh and cylinder, but Shift A is the shortcut. Very important to get used to the shortcuts. It will speed up your workflow tremendously. Let's add a cylinder. Don't move the cylinder at all. We want to go down to the bottom here first. This dialog box only appears when you first add your cylinder. If I move my cylinder now, it will disappear and the move tool will appear, and I can't get it back. So I'll undo that. Shift A, add, mesh, cylinder, and here's my cylinder parameters. Now I want to keep the vertex count very low because I'm going to add a subdivision surface modifier later. So I'm going to bring the vertex count down to 8. It's always good to have something divisible by 4 because then if you want to mirror in 2 directions, you can. So 8 being divisible by 4, I'll use that, and there we've got our starting shape. I'll minimize this dialog box now, and I'm going to rotate this on the y-axis 90 degrees. RY90. So you type RY90 in and it will rotate on the y-axis 90 degrees. And we got the starting point for our shape. I'm going to scale it on the x-axis, so S then X, and bring it in, and this is going to be the front of my gun. Now I want to change my mesh slightly. I'm going to go into edit mode with tab. You can also do that up here, but I prefer the keyboard shortcuts, which is tab, and I can press 1, 2 or 3 to go between vertices, edges and faces. So look down here for what I'm pressing if I forget to say. So I'm in face mode at the moment with 3. Click on this front face here, and I'm going to go to front view with 1 on my numpad. So that's your numpad, not the keys across the top, and rotate this round slightly. So R to rotate and give it some sort of forward look. Then I'm going to press I for inset. So this will create a new face and I can move my mouse inwards and it will create what will be a barrel hole. Then E to extrude and pull that inwards. So move your mouse slightly and press enter to set. Now can you notice it's going perpendicular to my face? So it's sort of going upwards slightly. And we can sort that out by going to front view and then Z, and you get this little wheel menu and you can go to wireframe mode, and then I can just grab in the Z axis, G then Z, and pull that down slightly. Now it's in the right position. Back to solid mode, Z, solid, and let's inset that again. To around there, E to extrude once more, and instead of going perpendicular, because that's the natural reaction when you press E, press X so it goes back in the X axis, so it can go back and forward in the X axis. And you can experiment with this and go back a bit further. Don't overlap it so it comes back here. So if I press G then X, don't have it coming out the back here, there's no need for that. And there should be about right. So let's start working on the back now. Let's grab this face, I to inset, and bring it in, just somewhere around there. Now in front view, I can then extrude this out, just a touch, so it's sticking out slightly, extrude again, a little bit further this time, and scale up. So S to scale, somewhere around there. 1 to front view again, E to extrude to about here, E to extrude again, and scale down. So these are sort of going to be the rubbery bits on the front. E to extrude again, scale up, and I like to make them different sizes. E to extrude again, E to extrude again, and scale down. So each time I'm extruding, I'm left clicking when I'm happy with the position. E to extrude again, scale, somewhere around there, E to extrude again, E to extrude again. There's a bit of a pattern happening here. And let's scale that down really slightly. So we've got these sort of rubbery bits. Now it's going to go into the big shape, which is the main body of the gun. So let's E to extrude. Now this time I've pressed E to extrude, but I'm just going to left click. Now that means I've got an extrusion here that I can just press S to scale up. And can you see it looks a bit odd because it's right on top of another face there. But as soon as I extrude this out again, E to extrude, it looks normal again. And the faces look normal. I'm going to do that once more because this can be a bit confusing. So I've gone back 3 or 4 times before this extrusion is there. E to extrude, left click. That means there's a face on top of the other face. And when I press S to scale, it all looks a bit weird. But when I extrude again, it comes out and it's fine. Now let's go to front view and let's start sort of shaping this. So let's scale it up. E to extrude. Let's just get the basic shape first. E to extrude, scale down. And then I'm going to do a loop cut down the middle here. So Control R is for a loop cut. That will add a new loop of vertices. So around there, and then I can scale them up until it's sort of a ball shape. It's probably a bit big, so I'll scale that down just a touch. Now the end isn't quite right at the moment, so I'm going to go 3 on my numpad. When you do a loop cut, it changes to edge mode. So 3 will change it back to faces, and I'll scale this in. Let's go to front view again and see if that's working. Now this one needs to be pulled along a bit, and maybe this one needs to be pulled along a bit. So we can press 2 to go to edge mode, and Alt left click to get an edge loop like this. Now I can grab it along in the X-axis, G then X, somewhere around there. Alt left click this one, G then X, and somewhere around there. We've got a sort of circly body. You can adapt your shapes as you see fit. Now at the moment it's very blocky, be this all low poly, which isn't such a bad thing. If you want to use this for games, you will need to have a low poly object like this, but we're just creating a fun artistic piece at the moment, so we're not worried about the poly count. So we'll go across to the Subdivision surface modifier, which is under the modifiers, where this spanner, or wrench if you're American, is, and add modifier, Subdivision surface. Now we can see it goes all sort of blobby and smooth-ish. I'm going to come out of edit mode for a moment so we can see roughly what it looks like. And it's kind of working, but I need to work on my shape a bit. I'm going to up the viewport resolution. So now we've got 2 subdivisions, and you can see what's happening. It's basically subdividing each face. I'll go back to edit mode into 4 and then into 4 again. So 4 and then into 4 again. That's what the Subdivision surface modifier does, but it smooths it out as well, which is quite clever. So back to object mode, right click, shade smooth. Oh, now that's interesting. We've got some sort of funny thing going on here. So let's just check that. If you ever have anything like this, then into edit mode, let's go into wireframe with Z on our keyboard, into wireframe, and see what's going on. Now it's a bit confusing with the Subdivision surface modifier on, so let's hide that. That's that little viewport tab here, and I can just hide it there. And can you see I've accidentally put a face in the middle. So when I extruded out from this area here, I was extruding and extruding along here, but when I repeated what I was doing, so I undid a few steps and repeated it, I accidentally extruded an extra face, and it's got a face inside the whole object. So let's go to face mode, and you should be able to see that fairly easily, because you'll have a dot in the middle like that. So if I click away, you can see it, it's a different shade. So I need to select that and just press delete faces. Really common problem for beginners. You shouldn't have any faces inside your mesh. It's a little bit tricky to see, but you should be able to see the color variations. Can you see these inside faces are a lighter color? Okay, so back to solid mode, Z, solid mode, and now it's looking normal. Back to the Subdivision surface modifier, and that's working. Now at this point you may want to adapt your shape slightly. I want the front to look a bit bigger. In face mode, you can Alt click and select an edge going across. So Alt left click on one of these edges going across, and that will select the whole face loop. I could then scale this out with S, but I don't want it really going in the X-axis, so I can press Shift X so it doesn't go along the red line, that is, the X-axis. If ever you're confused, the Cartesian coordinates are up here. It looks very blobby at the moment though, doesn't it? But we can fix that in a bit. I might like to as well go to edge mode and select the edges in here. Now can you see it's difficult to see them, But with the Subdivision surface modifier, I can press this button at the end here, and then I can see all my edges. It's a little bit tricky working in this format, but at least I can see my edges and I can scale them down if I want them to look a bit nicer. So yes, it's all a bit blobby at the moment. I'm going to come out of this mode for a moment and show you how you can sort of sharpen things up. There's a few ways to do this, but I think the best way is to actually add edge loops. And sometimes they're called supporting loops or sometimes proximity loops, and I'll show you what they do. So if I add a loop cut here with Control R, I can set my loop and then move it across. And can you see what's happening to my shape? It's making it sharper at the edges. The edge I bring it towards, it makes it sharper. Hence why they're called supporting loops or proximity loops. So I'll create one about there. And on the inside, I'd like one coming around here. So Control R to create a loop cut. You'll have to move your mouse around to get it into the right position. And I want it there. And I can create one and pull it in slightly there. And it's looking a bit sharper and nicer. That's great. I might want this edge out a bit more. It looks a little bit strange at the moment having such a flat front, I think. So I'm going to go to face mode with 3. Alt left click on one of these edges. I can just about see it. If you can't, remember to press this button here and you can select it. That's that one there or that one there. But I prefer to work in this mode because then I can really see what's going on and what I'm selecting. Now I want to scale this out so it's a little bit flatter. And can you see we've got this really big curve going on here? We need a loop cut in there. Let's just see what we've got going on. Can you see how awkward it is to see what's going on with this mode? If I try and add a loop cut with this one now, it's possible, but it's just a little bit awkward. And it's difficult to know where they stop and where they start. So I'm going to undo that and use the other method. So Control R in here, bring it out. And I've got a loop in there, which I want to bring out as well. So Alt left click on that and scale that out. So you need to play with your loops a little bit and add supporting loops. So this one's a supporting loop and I can scale that in to support the inside or scale it out to support the outside. Hopefully that makes sense. It starts getting a bit complicated at that point. If you get really confused, then the best thing to do is just go through, select a few of these, Shift, Alt, left click, and you can just delete, dissolve edges, and that will get rid of your proximity loops. But it might flatten out your shape like this. I'm going to undo that. So the last place I need one is in here to sort of give it some sharpness in there. Let's go back to the non-cage result, and you can see that sharpness working. So that's proximity loops. I can have one in here as well. So Control R and bring it back. And I might like some in here. So imagine there's sort of a dent in here where this rubbery stuff is going to go into. So Control R along there and sharpen that out a bit. And what I'd like to do is select these faces and bring them in. So 3 on your keyboard, Alt left click to select this base loop, and then I can E to extrude and pull that in. And can you see what that's doing? So pull that into there. I might scale it down a little bit as well. And there in object mode, we've got quite an interesting looking thing going on there. Now remember, you can go back to this mode to see what's going on with your edges. Maybe I want to go back to edge mode and bring this one in. So scale that in. I can always bring that back as well. G, then X to bring it back in the X axis, or forward to create an overlap. So have a bit of a play around with these different shapes. Maybe I want this one here, Alt left click, and grab it backwards in the X axis. So hopefully that's not too complicated, and it's just about creating edge loops. And with a bit of practice, you'll find this nice and easy. And it's nice doing a sci-fi weapon like this because you can kind of have happy accidents, as Bob Ross would love to say. So I'm going to sharpen up this edge loop, so I'll scale that out a bit. So you can really sharpen it up like this. Looks pretty crazy, but I'm going to leave it about there. What you can also do is Alt left click on something, and let's say I want to scale this up, but it's starting to affect my shape. Or I want to move it back in the X axis, but again it's affecting my shape. Looks kind of cool though. So I might keep that idea in a second, but I'm going to undo that. And if I press GG for edge slide, you can slide along an edge, and that's very helpful. but I quite like that original idea. Get a bit more shape to it. But I want to sharpen up this edge, so again, Control R and sharpen it up, like so. Oh, we're looking fun now, aren't we? I think it needs a bit of bulk, so I'll select this middle one and scale that out. It's got a very sort of bulbous look to it. I think what I'll do is I'll turn Proportional Edit on. So another tool up the top here, and Proportional Edit, if I press Scale now, you get this circle and you can change the size of it with the wheel, and that will change the size of the surrounding vertices as well. You can get a really sort of rounded out, weird gun look thing. And I'm just going to adapt the shape slightly, so maybe bring this one back. Ah, it's such fun, isn't it? Okay, so I've got my base of my sci-fi weapon. Let's create a grip down the bottom here. So let's go to side view with 3, and I can see the back of my object. And I'll just shift right click here so I can position my new object just there. And instead of extruding from this object, I'm just going to place an object on top of it. So Shift A, and I'm going to use a cube. I'll scale it down, and I'll go to front view and move it into position. So G and R to rotate. It's quite wide, but I quite like that at the moment. Now into edit mode, and let's get this end face here. I'm in face mode with 3. Back to front view with 1 and extrude that out. Not too far actually, and extrude it out again there. And then grab this front face here, back to front view, and G to move it outwards. And I've got Proportional Edit on still, so I'll undo that by just right clicking or cancel it and turn off Proportional Edit, and G, then X. Now it's moving in the X axis, which I don't want, but if I press X twice, it moves in the local X axis. Now that's tough to understand, but if I press N at the moment and go to Object Mode and Item, you can see that I've rotated this. So with the rotation enabled, I can go to the local axis and still rotate in its local X-axis, Z-axis or Y-axis going forward and backwards from us. And to do that, you just press the axis twice for the local axis. Now it looks very blocky at the moment. Let's add a Subdivision surface modifier. And now it looks very blobby. So let's up the viewport resolution, and we need to add our proximity loops. Into edit mode, let's add one at the top here, so Control R and pull it upwards. Also back into object mode and right click Shade Smooth, and that will look a bit better. And it looks kind of fun. So back into edit mode, and let's start editing our shape. So I'm going to select these faces and move them into position. I quite like that. And maybe I'll move this edge just here backwards into front view so I can see. Ah, that's good fun, isn't it? This one as well. If I'd done that in Proportional Edit, that would have made more sense. Something around there. Oh, I like it. So, back into front view, into edit mode, and I think it'd be helpful if I had some sort of lip attaching it to the body of our gun. So, 3 for face mode, Alt left click one of these edges going down here to select that loop, and E to extrude. Then S for scale, and that's creating this sort of lip to attach it to my body. Now I'm going to need a bit of editing, but there's no point in editing one side and then the other because it's a very symmetrical object. So let's mirror it. Now there's a really easy way to mirror. It's using the Auto Mirror tool. But you must make sure your object origin is in the center. If I go to edit mode now and select all and move it over here, my object origin is here, and therefore the mirror will appear all the way over here. So we'll undo that. Make sure your origin is in the center. There's an easy, quick way to do that. If in object mode, right click, set origin, origin to geometry. Now your mirror should work down the middle. And there's a really nice tool for mirroring. If you go to Edit, Preferences, Add-ons, and type in Auto Mirror. In fact, you can see it there, and I've got it ticked. Tick that, close this down, and in the Edit menu, you'll now have Auto Mirror. Now look at your axis you want to mirror in, and we want to mirror in the Y-axis. So click the Y-axis, press Auto Mirror, and there we have our mirror. Can you see it change the shape slightly of our object though? And that's because we have a new supporting loop down the middle. Even though it's down the middle, it's still a supporting loop and still adds a bit of bulk to our grip. So I'm going to edit this slightly. I'll select this edge loop here and scale it down. I'm going to do a loop cut in the middle here. So Control R, and maybe grab this bottom bit here. G, then ZZ, to give it a sort of curve at the bottom. I'm going to select this edge loop down here. So 2 for edges, select that edge loop, and GG to slide it across so I can make it more curved around here. It's quite fun, isn't it? I'm going to keep the front though, so I've got a place for the actual trigger. And this area here, I'm going to box select these and just G, then ZZ to move it in the local Z axis to bring it down a touch. So it's following the curve of the body of my gun. Now this selection here, G, ZZ, just make sure that's working. And that looks okay. And I think I need to do here as well, G, then ZZ, and I'll have to do the back as well, G, ZZ. And that's looking great fun, isn't it? Now, when you're doing that, you must make sure that you're happy with the body of your gun first. So if I go into the gun now and start moving things around, GG to edge slide, can you see it's changed the position of my gun? So watch out for that. Let's undo those steps. Okay, let's add a trigger at the front. So Shift right click, Shift A to add, Mesh Cube, scale it down, into position, scale in the Z, and we've got a very basic trigger. It's very blocky at the moment. So let's add our Subdivision surface modifier. Makes it all blobby, up the resolution, right click shade smooth, and move this into position. Now I might put some proximity loops in. So into edit mode, Control R, and do one at the front here, and one at the back. And I quite like the look of that at the moment. I might make it a bit longer though, scale in the Z. Now I want to add a bit less of a curve here. So if I add a loop in the middle and just add one in the middle, it adds just enough proximity to give it that less of a curve there. I might bring that down just a touch and rotate it just a touch. Maybe scale in the Y as well. It's probably a bit big, but this alien only has 3 fingers, so there's one there and one there. That's fine. Okay, so that's enough to be going on with for building the base model, but I will show you how to build the wires. So let's have a wire coming out the top here, Shift right click, and then Shift A to add, and we're going to add a curve. So slightly different this time, a Bezier curve. And this is what the Bezier curve looks like when you first add it. Into edit mode, and then you've got the 2 handles. If I grab one, you can see a handle there. And I'll move that to the top of my gun around there. And let's grab this one and move it over here. Now I can rotate these and move them into position like that. Grab the ends, or I can grab the handles and move them like that. And you can see the curve editing. If I grab this handle and move it up, you can see it follows that path now. So let's rotate this one so it sort of sticks in like that. And if we want to add any points, we can select 2, right click, subdivide, and then we've got another one here. So there we go. So it's going to come from there. I'd like them if they were all aligned. So if you select all and press scale Y0, it aligns them in the y-axis. So 3 to go to front view, and let's line this up. If I press Control 3, I can actually see from the other side. So 3 and then, or Control 3 is to see from the other side view. And let's go to object mode and just move this into position here. And move these points in the Z-axis so they're in the right place. I'm going to rotate these a bit as well. So rotate by the Y. It's a good idea to have a bit of a play with these things and figure out exactly how to use Bezier handles. They take a little while to get used to, but once you've got them into position, then let's go to the curve tool down here. And in order to add thickness to our curve, we can go to the geometry section just here and the bevel. And I'm going to put that up a little bit. On mine it's 0.08 meters, but it does depend on how far you've edited your shape. Now you can start editing a bit more and move them further into position, scale them up if you need to, and so forth. And you might want to add a bit of variation to the shape now. Now this is all okay at the moment. You can up the detail or the resolution of your bevel, which is the circular bit going around the middle. So if I click on a point, zoom in with full stop on my numpad, you can see it's a very detailed circle. but I tend to keep it quite low because then I can add a subdivision surface modifier later if I want to. So I tend to bring the resolution down to 1, and the other resolution will be here. So you can see the detail it's adding to my shape. Again, I keep these fairly low because I tend to turn these into meshes later. But if you don't want the complexity of that, then just bring it nice and detailed up there, and probably only to about 3 or 4 there. Now if you want to convert it to a mesh, then follow along and I'll go down to about 5, I would say. That way you can edit the shape a bit later, and then my resolution of 1. And at that point, I go out of edit mode and I go up to Object, Convert to Mesh from Curve. Now when I go into edit mode, you can see how basic our curve looks. Now what I can do when it's at this sort of resolution, I can Control R and do a loop cut and bring it down, and then create these bits in between. So if I press 3 to go to face mode, Alt, left click on one of these, I can then extrude that out and scale it up. I'll turn off the Z with Shift Z, and I'll just have to rotate that a bit into position. And I'll probably have to select some of these edge loops and line them up a little bit. You can be fairly rough with that. Another loop cut down here. This one will be a bit tougher, so scale, E, then S to scale, and then I'll have to select this edge loop here, and GG to edge slide. Now let's add a subdivision surface modifier to this, and then add my proximity loops. Control R, bring that down, Control R, bring that down, and there we go. Does need a bit of tidying up there. Let's sort that out now. So there's all the techniques that you need to make the gun itself. Try adding your own variation of this gun and experiment by adding wires all over the place and blobs here and there. That way you'll learn more, and if you do come across any problems, then comment below and I'll get back to you. In the next episode, we'll be colouring in by adding materials and making it all shiny and zappy. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.